wait, if I said reviewers don't have RTX 5060 drivers to test the card, how are we starting to see tests of the RTX 5060 coming from review outlets? Well, that's because this is preview content, which in and of itself has its own controversies, but this goes way beyond that. And I want to be really clear that there's a difference between the controversy around a preview itself and what's really going on here, which is much worse than that. What's going on here is most reviewers cannot test the 5060 right now. It's not just that we can't publish the test because there is a review embargo or something like that. It means like literally cannot test the card because we do not have a driver. I want to make sure you all understand how big of a deal having the driver is. Because it's not just if I ran tests with the 5060 right now that it would perform worse because it's not like the right driver or it's not up to date. No, it's like you literally cannot test the card without a driver. It just doesn't work. So review outlets that don't have a driver right now cannot begin working on an RTX 5060 review. It just can't be done. They have to wait until they have a driver. So it was already very controversial that Nvidia was not providing driver access ahead of time like they usually do, especially for major launches. Like a 60 class product is generally the most popular, biggest sales card within an Nvidia graphics card generation. So to not provide review access to the drivers was very unprecedented for a 60 class launch and already came with its own issues. But what's happening right now is much worse, and the way in which it's a lot worse than that is a little bit subtle. So I want to make sure I'm clear on this. I usually shoot my videos in one take. I'm having to do another take on this one because I don't think I explained it quite well enough right off the bat on my first try. So here's the thing. Preview content has its own issues and controversies, but some people are just focusing on that as the issue here, the preview content itself. That's not what's so bad about this. What is so bad about this is that some media has review access now, and others do not. And that difference, the difference on whether you can currently be working on an RTX 5060 review, I don't care about the publishing of a preview. That's not what I'm talking about. The actual theoretically independent review. I cannot work on this now without driver access. Hardware Unboxed cannot work on a review without driver access. Gamers Nexus cannot work on a review without driver access. But people who have driver access right now can be working on their independent, theoretically, review because they have driver access. So in other words, the RTX 5060, I think, is supposed to go on sale tomorrow, right? The 19th. And when it goes on sale, there, at least initially, I thought weren't going to be any reviews, which already is a bit of a problem for the consumer because I thought no reviewers had driver access, that we would all have to download the publicly available driver when it was publicly available and then begin the review process. Now, obviously, you can test all your other graphics cards ahead of time and then just run tests on the 5060, create your bar graphs or side-by-side footage or however your content is structured, and then publish the review. So reviews would probably be delayed about 1 day. Maybe some people willing to super crunch would be able to get it out within a few hours of getting the driver, run the card through some tests, generate your graphs, get it out. And this already had problems because, for one, like I said, consumers wouldn't have access to reviews when the card first goes on sale, which is often your best bet to get it at MSRP because that's when that seems to be most available. And then the ones that are on sale later are generally the ones that are higher priced. So that was already problematic. But then from the consumer perspective, and then from the reviewer perspective, it's also problematic in that it encourages crunch because there's a incentive to be first to publish. And with the incentive to be first and the incentive to crunch, there's also an incentive to rush, which likely would mean that the first reviews being published would be the least thorough, or at least the or were produced under insane crunch, which might be more likely to have mistakes and things like that. So there were already issues with just restricting the driver access until it was publicly available. The whole review embargo system, where everybody publishes at the same time and we all had a week or sometimes more to work on the review, means that there's less crunch involved, you have time to produce a thorough review, and there's not a rush to be first. Well, now, this is worse than that. Because now, there's no rush to be first. The first reviews have already been selected by Nvidia themselves. The first review outlets to be able to publish a, not preview, again, that's not my issue with all of this, the review, the theoretically independent review. Preview content, at least if it's responsibly done, should be making it very clear that it is a preview content under very specific preview conditions and not a fully independent analysis. So again, that has its own controversies and whatever, but that's not even what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here is reviews that will not be published with any sort of asterisks. Because preview content should be published with that kind of asterisk, and people should just be aware of what they're looking at. But the reviews that will be published first, I'm assuming at the moment the cards are publicly available, are only going to be the reviews from people who currently have driver access. Who currently has driver access? Only the media willing to participate in this preview program, and only media who were even offered the opportunity to participate in that preview program, which very much was not all media. I'm not sure who was even offered this. There's clearly multiple people who not only were offered but did accept this, which again, preview content in and of itself is its own thing. But this is putting anybody who was offered this in a really awkward position, and then people who weren't offered this in a disadvantaged position. Do you see what I'm saying, right? So if you were not offered the opportunity to do this type of preview content, then your review will now be late, no matter how fast you work on producing it once the drivers are publicly available, because only certain media has this preview driver, right? Also, so if you weren't even offered the opportunity to participate in this kind of a preview system, then you are, by definition, going to be late on your review because other outlets have an advantage against you now. But also, the issue is media outlets might have been more inclined to turn down this type of preview content if it didn't have this tied to it. Do you see that, right? Like, for example, a lot of the outlets that did publish this type of content are getting massive pushback in their comment section, and they even wrote up in their reviews and with pinned comments saying things like, "We understood we would get pushback for this preview content, but it was the only way we could get a review driver to publish an independent review," which is different than the preview content. Now, I'm not here to weigh in on what they should have done and the morality and who did what and call out specific review outlets. Like I said, a lot of people are publishing this type of preview content, but a lot of people aren't. And a lot of people weren't even necessarily offered the opportunity. For example, just to be clear, like I was never given this opportunity, so I didn't even have the chance to decide whether I would accept it or not. Like, it just wasn't even an opportunity. But I'm saying that being given this kind of an opportunity is kind of a poisoned offer to the media outlet, right? Because now the media outlet, who maybe didn't want to publish a preview content that's heavily curated by Nvidia, maybe they didn't want to publish that. But now they're like, oh, but if I do that, then I can get the review driver and publish a review ahead of anybody who didn't agree to this. And they know that some media will agree to this. And so now they're like, well, if I don't do this, somebody else will. They'll get the first full 50-60 review out there. And I want to be clear, review different than preview. So that's why I have such a big issue with this. is that generally preview content is a very distinct and separate thing than review content. And some outlets are only reviewers. They don't do previews, right? But now the only way to be first with your review is to have done a preview, which is a lot more heavily curated and controlled by Nvidia. For example, based on quotes from the some of the people who did agree to this type of preview content, this type of preview content only allowed comparisons against, I think it was like a 3060, 2060 Super, no cards that also have frame generation. So the idea was to only show the 5060 at 1080p, nothing above that, because obviously there's going to be issues with the 8 gigabytes of VRAM, even at 1080p to be honest, but also only within certain games, at certain graphic settings, using quality level upscaling at 1080p, with multi-frame generation turned on, and then compared only in those certain games at those certain settings against certain other graphics cards, which very much don't have frame generation support, etc. So now, generally, whatever your feelings are about that type of preview content, some review outlets will not do that type of preview content, which means they now don't have review driver access, so their reviews will now be late compared to media who do that type of preview content and were offered that type of preview content. In general, what this means is the day 0, or I guess it would be day 1 reviews, the first reviews to be published, very well might be independent of the full independent thoughts, etc. But Nvidia was kind of hand-picking who would be able to get to publish that type of content. It's not going to be your usual suite of reviewers. Unless they somehow, maybe it'd be kind of funny if some of these media then leaked the review driver access to other media. I have no idea. Anyway, I don't know if that can get tracked or anything. But anyway, the point is, to my knowledge, it seems like the first theoretically independent reviews for the 5060 are going to be a little more curated by Nvidia than usual. Let's put it that way. Because it'll only be media outlets who were even offered this kind of preview content, and they had to agree to accept that kind of content. And that's going to be the reviews. Those outlets are the ones publishing the first reviews for the 5060. And that's where I have an issue with all of this, okay? It seems to be handpicking winners for who gets to have the first 5060 review. With Nvidia having an unusually heavy hand in that choice. And I don't like that. I really hope that this is not a sign of things to come, because then it's going to be a lot harder to trust day 1 review content if Nvidia has an unusually heavy hand in selecting who are the lucky ones who get to publish reviews. Again, previews always have that sort of issue and should be clearly marked. Reviews aren't going to have any of those asterisks, but they're only going to come from certain hand-picked media outlets. That's what I have a problem with. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comment section. Now, just to follow up on when will I have a 5060 review? So I want to be clear that not only do I not have driver access, I don't even currently have a 5060. I actually did get in touch with Gigabyte, and so I will be getting a 5060 sample, but I don't currently have it yet. It's going to be a couple of days late, and I don't have the driver access anyway, even if I did have it now. So mine will be coming at some point. In somewhat related news, I did finally buy a 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte, so do expect my delayed review of the 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte coming soon. I'm also generally just updating my whole game testing suite to all games from 2025. I want to be testing the newest games because I think that's the best preview of what the future holds is what the newest ones do now. Anyway, more on that in the future, but whatever. I don't know, let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comment section. This certainly feels unprecedented, and I really don't like it. But I still hope you all manage to have an excellent day.